Hey guys, John Paulamy here, Actionable Intelligence. Today is Saturday, March 8th, and this is the weekly market update. Still recovering from the cold or flu, whatever I had, so bear with me. The disclaimer, anything that you hear or see on this podcast or video is not to be taken as investment advice. I am not a registered financial advisor. I cannot give you individual financial advice. Anything that you hear or see on this video or podcast is for informational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence on anything that you hear on this podcast or video. It's your money, it's your responsibility. Okay, so this was from Jesse Felder on X. I thought this was excellent. Basically, what you have here is uh, every 15-year period since 1970, basically on a chart, you see the years. And you see the 2010 to 2024 period uh, has been the best one for stocks since 1970. It says here the current bull market has been extraordinary, as Bridgewater reports, out of any 15-year period to be invested in equities dating back to 1970. The one we've just lived through was the best. Stocks have been on a relentless tear, with any dips quickly fading into memory. Returns have been more than double the average. You see, the average here is 5.9%. Okay. Uh, Typically, stocks with dividends reinvested over the long term are somewhere like 8.5, 9%, something like that. So obviously, this has been the best period for stocks uh, for over 50 years. The question is, where do we go from here? As I've pointed out before, we're at, depending on how you want to look at it, overvalued conditions exist. And typically, what happens historically, data is there that if you buy stocks and pay high prices for them, if you buy them at overvalued levels, your subsequent returns over the next 5 to 10 years are going to underperform. Obviously, that's not a guarantee. We may be in a new gilded age. The US is going to dominate, and it's nothing but sugar plums and visions of ice creams and unicorns and all that, and we're just going to keep going up. But I doubt it. Uh, Typically, you get into a situation where things get overvalued, and then they mean revert. Things that are undervalued, then capital rotates into those sectors. That's the whole thing that I've been talking about, and we're starting to see more and more of that, as I'll point out later in the presentation. Now, again, that doesn't mean that things can't keep going up, but you know, your odds are not good. You can win any particular hand in a hand of poker with any cards, the original two cards. It's possible. But if you play like that with cards that are, not suited or not high ranked cards, your your ability to win long term is not good. If you get Jack two, you can win with that hand. If, it's very easy to get a flop and have, pair of jacks or set, just three jacks. That's happened, when you're in a big blind or something and everybody checks and you get to see the flop and then, you get bailed out. But if you try to play that jack two consistently every time you get it, it will be a losing hand consistently because it's a terrible hand. The same thing applies to these markets. If you try to buy stocks when they're overvalued, the research is clear. The data is clear. History is clear. But, I continue to point this out. I'm not going to belabor the point, but I thought this was, I did not realize this was the best performing time frame. That should tell you something, especially when you look at what the average is. So I wanted to get into this, not back into like economic forecasting. I kind of wanted to talk about what I think is going on when I observe this administration. You know, I get, I have a little bit of amusement. I think the first Trump administration, I don't think they were prepared. They didn't really think they were going to win. They got in there. They surrounded themselves with, you know, people that had been around. They just grabbed who they could, establishment people. It was kind of hit and miss. This is not the same type of administration. For the last 4 years, they've been preparing for the possibility that they would win. They did win. They have a plan, and I you cannot really don't listen to the media. Let me make an argument here and see if you agree with it or disagree, or if it sounds reasonable. And it has a parallel. And the parallel is the Reagan administration that came in during the early in 1980. Parallels are very, very similar. You had a change agent coming in, Reagan, after a failed Democratic presidency. You had high inflation, you had economic malaise, you had, you know, foreign policy stature of the United States was down. If you remember during the um, Carter administration, just one of the main points of that administration, foreign policy failure, was the attempt to go in and get the hostages in Iran, and it was a disaster. You can look it up. Lost a bunch of people. People don't even really think about or talk about it, but it was a real mess. And so then you had Reagan come in. He had a historic win, Morning in America, that's what they called it. And at the time, what they did was they took a gamble, and the gamble was um, keep rates high. I mean, at that time, rates were super high. There was a man in there named Paul Volcker at the Fed. They raised rates very high to crush inflation. Okay, and it worked. The problem with that policy was it caused a very, very severe and deep recession. But this all happened early in Reagan's presidency. So they took the pain early. Okay. Concurrently with the very strict monetary policy, which resulted in inflation coming down and, of course, the economy going into a recession, Reagan embarked on a whole slew of the administration pushed through a whole slew of deregulation. They deregulated the economy, made it more efficient. They set the stage for the recovery. Okay. And that gets ignored. Everybody just gives Volcker all the credit, but there was a lot of other things going on. Okay. So bear with me here. So then I didn't have time to put all the charts together. You can go look at the charts for GDP and all this stuff and employment. Basically, inflation came down. Okay. Then the Fed was able to start cutting rates. You know, we had a 40-year basically bull market in bonds as interest rates over time came down from 1980 to basically 2020. Okay. And a lot of that happened during the Reagan administration. We had it. So what did that do? Coupled with the deregulation and some of the other things that were going on, um, it reignited the economy. The economy came back, employment came back. The Morning in America happened. They had another election in 1984, and Reagan won that. So you had 8 years of Reagan and then 4 years of Bush won. Now, there will be people in the comments making up, look, that's what happened. Okay. You can disagree with it, you can nitpick it, but that's what they did. And I think making a point, okay, it led to 12 years of basically Republican control of the presidency and a lot of stock market gains and a lot of employment gains and things like this. You can look at the data, it's all available. You can nitpick around the edges. You could, somebody's going to say, well, you talk about Carter's foreign policy. What about Reagan's foreign policy with the Beirut in the Marines? Yes, but I'm saying overall, people vote with their pocketbooks. And so coming into this administration, I think we have something similar when we look at Bessonette and some of the other people in the administration that are like serious people. And it's something similar. Now, if you remember, before they came in, they were talking about, or they've even still been talking about the three arrows, if you will, that they want to do. They want to get rates down, right? They want to get the deficit down to 3% of GDP. They want to get rates down because getting the deficit down will put less pressure on the bond market, less treasury issuance. They want to get energy prices down, and they think that this will help lead to plus all the other things. They want to deregulate. You see what's going on with Doge, cut the waste, fraud, and abuse. And so the fact of the matter is that we know from the work that other folks have done that we just came from a period of fiscal dominance. One of the reasons we didn't have a recession is because the U.S. government under the Biden administration was just spending money at a crazy rate. You remember all the times I talked about the fact that we were spending at wartime levels and we weren't in a war. Deficit spending, 6, 7% of GDP, running up the debt. Okay. So fiscal dominance is what allowed the economy to stay afloat. And so I think that Betsonette and Trump and the other people around Trump in the economic sphere have looked at this and said, we're going to do the Volcker Reagan gambit, but we're not going to raise rates. What we're going to do is we're going to initiate some economic weakness and possibly even a recession. We know from looking at the Atlanta Fed, which does projections, they're projecting uh, the economy to contract. Okay. Why is that? Job cuts. You see, the job cuts are now moving higher recently. A lot of this is because of the government being government payrolls being contracted by the Doge thing. I think it's 68,000 people have been let go so far, something like that. Uh, remove the fiscal dominance, the crazy spending, pulling that back because what is GDP? It's a component. The government spending is a big component of GDP, whether it's efficient spending or not, whether it's needed spending or not, it's still spending. That's why GDP is not the best metric for economic measuring economic growth, but that's what we do. That's what'll grab the headline. So you run the gambit of contracting fiscal spending, forcing unemployment higher, okay? Take maybe even cause a recession early on in your presidency. You hear people in the media, people on the left, and opponents of Mr. Trump's administration walking all over the place about this guy's going to cause a recession. These people don't know what they're doing. There's no plan. It's hit and miss. No, there is a plan. That's the plan. They're running a gambit. And so the idea is you get through. So what happens if the economy begins to contract? Well, hopefully, as part of you see that energy prices have been declining. That isn't even a result of drill baby drill. That's just a result of temporary oversupply because we have weak economies around the world in the major areas. China, Europe, the US to a certain extent now. Okay. And so you have energy prices coming down. That's going to help bring headline inflation down. When you get into layoffs and job losses, that's going to cut back consumer spending. So this is the gambit they're running. I'm not saying it's going to work. Let me caveat this and say I'm just telling you what I think is happening. I'm not suggesting that I agree with it or I think it's going to work. I'm telling you what I think they're doing. And so if inflation comes down and the economy's weak, that gives room for the Federal Reserve to cut rates, maybe even cut rates more than the dot plot currently shows. That's one of the arrows, right? Remember, get the interest rates down. Trump likes lower interest rates. What's the benefit of having lower interest rates? Well, in 2025 and 2026, Treasury has to resell 60% of the outstanding $32 trillion in debt. They would like to term that out. That means sell the debt at longer maturities. Okay. And so if rates are lower, that's a benefit to doing that. What's the other benefit of lower rates? The housing market is in a basically free fall. It's in a depression. If rates come down, housing affordability goes up. Are you seeing where this is starting to go now? If rates come down, The dollar weakens. That's another thing that Mr. Trump and his administration want. They want a weaker dollar. We're at a level of the dollar where a lot of folk, analysts are saying it's overvalued. It's been at a level that has shown it to be overvalued in the past. Why do they want a lower dollar? It makes U.S. exports more competitive around the world. It helps in the reshoring process if you're going to bring manufacturing back, if you're going to revitalize uh, lower middle class, tradespeople, small business. That's Trump's constituency, not Wall Street, not academia, not the media, not the establishment or elites, working class people. Okay. So this is what I think they're doing. Take the pain early for the greater gain later. Because remember, you don't really have 4 years. You have 18 months, 2 years, because you have congressional elections every 2 years. And typically what happens during the off cycle congressional election is the party out of power typically gains seats. And so they need to blitzkrieg this thing, take the pain early, hope that lower rates, lower energy prices stimulate the economy sufficiently and kickstart the economy. Why? Because we've already heard what Hakeem Jeffries, who's going to be the next speaker if the Democrats take over, the second day that they get sworn in, he's going to try to impeach Trump. We're going to start that circus again. And so things will get bogged down. That's why they're running this blitzkrieg operation and everybody's head spinning. So that's what I think they're doing. And do I think it'll work? Possibly. The other thing that they're doing is they're not haphazardly running around. I was listening to some foreign people talk about this. I think it was the Saudi prime minister, one of the Emirates, and they were kind of like talking about what Mr. Trump's doing. We're not trying to be unfair to other countries. You want fair trade. And so these wild tariffs are put on and off. It seems haphazard. It's a negotiating tactic. Okay. People don't look because it's not reported at the underlying. It's not like these countries are just sitting there and they have open trade with us, and now we're just going to go in there and just start beating them up. No, the other countries have tariffs also, and some of them are very high for U.S. products. That's the whole point. Get the people to the table and let's have a real negotiation. Okay. That's the whole purpose. Not to try to run the government with tariffs, not just he wakes up and pulls a wild hair out of his butt and announces tariffs. It seems haphazard because most people don't know what the hell's going on in their own life, or they have 6 foot sphere syndrome, yet they want to comment on what they think is, trade policy for the United States. Okay. I'm not saying this is going to work. I'm saying that's what I think they're doing. And so if you take some early pain, it worked in Argentina, it worked in the Reagan administration. You're gambling. You're gambling that you can take the pain early to set the stage for gains down the line, because people will look at their current circumstances. They won't go, well, I've got, my business took off under Trump here in his second or third year. But I remember when I was struggling when he first came in. I'm gonna, we need to get rid of this guy. That's not how people think. They look at their gas pump when they go fill the gas up. They're standing there. Watch them. They're standing there, you know, looking at the price. Remember when they used to have the Biden stickers with him pointing at the gas price? People would put them on the gas pump. Remember that? I did that. Or they look at the prices they pay in the grocery store. Egg prices are making a big deal. Well, the Biden administration called 100 million egg laying chickens. What did you think? It's supply and demand. These things will hopefully resolve, and then the gain comes, and then everybody will be euphoric going into these elections. And so the gamble is, if you're able to pull this off, maybe you do something like Reagan did, Reagan Volcker gambit. It works. Maybe it works. So I think that's what's happening. I don't think it's just haphazard and people are running around doing this, doing that. There's no plan. Now, if you look at the people that are involved in this administration, these are serious people. They spent time. They didn't just throw this team together. They were ready to go from day one. Have you even seen or heard from the chief of staff? Do you know who the chief of staff is for the president? People should investigate who this woman is. These are squared away people. You may not agree with their politics. You may not like them. You may look into their background and say they're establishment shills or they're in it to win it for themselves. I'm just telling you that at least they're serious people and they have been successful in the past in the private sector. And I believe they're running a plan. And I believe it has a chance of being successful. I'm not saying it will be. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just telling you what I think is happening. So I call it, I haven't heard anybody else call it this, but I think it's the Volcker Reagan gambit. I think Nixon did something similar. I mean, it's basically Malay, a certain Malay thing. Things are turning around in Argentina now. If you look at the statistics, he's getting ready to have an election. You take the pain early. You do these unorthodox things. You take all the incoming media fire and all the nonsense from the midwits on social media that don't know what's going on in their own life, but have comment about everything that happens. And then when this thing goes, then the vast majority go, hey, my life's better. Gas prices are down. Food prices are down. I just got a promotion at work. I was out of work, but I got another job. If people, that's how people look at this. I've been around some very savvy political people in my life, and they will tell you very simply, when a person goes into that voting booth, they vote their wallet. That's straight, you know, from political hacks all throughout history. Yes, there's people that certain amounts of the population that are wedded to, all they vote about is prayer in school or abortion or what have you. But the vast majority of people vote their wallet. It's just that simple. And that's what they're trying to appeal to. So we'll see if it worked. I think that's what's happening. We'll follow it. It doesn't really matter for what we're doing. If they do pull this off, though, uh, you know, I think a lot of what we're invested in the actionable intelligence alert newsletter is going to benefit. That's what we're set up for. I think that, but we have to monitor. We have to see if this is going to happen. You may disagree. You may say these people are all in it for themselves, and they're just cutting everybody's Social Security. They're doing this. Okay, well, I mean, if you can't, you have to give some credit to some people. I used to even give credit when somebody, even the Biden administration, when they reinitiated nuclear, started going down that road. I gave them proper ups and accolades because they were doing the right thing, in my view. So that's what I think is happening. So let's talk about drill, baby, drill. I mean, oil prices are down, obviously. That's going to be a benefit. That's a huge tax cut to working people, to Trump's constituency. When they see that, it's psychological, perception wise, plus it does benefit their wallets. Okay. The thing I am concerned about is a lot of other people around the world are stimulating their economies, and we haven't seen any new oil, a lot of, new investment into oil. The underinvestment continues. So if we do have some demand growth that exceeds some current, overabundance, we could have a problem with the oil price later this year, which I think is going to happen. But that's a discussion for another day. So you even heard during his congressional joint session speech, yelling out "drill, baby, drill." I mean, this is typical what propagandists do. Uh, they tell you to stick to two or three ideas and just repeat them over and over. That's that's all the midwits can handle. The average person, they can't. They're not deep thinkers. They're living on slogans, perception, and emotion. And so Sarah Palin quoted this back in, I think credit goes to her. That's what they talk about. But what's really happening in the oil patch? So here's a slide. Uh, I think Christine Guerrero put this up. I don't know exactly who it's from, but anyways, she put it up on her X feed. You see, U.S. crude supply growth since January 2023 has been in decline. It hasn't been going up. People aren't drilling. We've talked about this. We've talked about the consolidation that's happened in the oil field, in the shale fields, that you have big corporate, Chevron, Oxy, these folks, they're not out there just drill, baby, drill. Yes, they're still small operators. If the price of oil goes up $10, they'll rig up and drill a well. Okay, but I'm talking about big players now. They just haven't said that that's what they're going to do, not at these oil prices. Okay, they're not going to do something that's contrary to their interests. And their interests are what? The zeitgeist, as we've said before, has shifted from drill baby drill. The incentive structure for these executives is not to raise production at any cost. The incentive structure is return to shareholders, pay down debt, and total return to shareholders through buybacks and dividends. So there's no need to drill baby drill. So let's go through some of these bullet points. U.S. production recovered from low levels of pandemic despite a decline in rig count, implying efficiency and productivity gains. Trump revoked few of the Biden administration's executive orders that withdrew acreage from oil and gas leasing, plus facilitating permitting. But shale producers unlikely to sacrifice returns for the sake of output growth, especially in an uncertain environment. I think that's the key bullet point here. Again, shale producers unlikely, not only is it unlikely, they've said that on their conference calls, to sacrifice returns for the sake of output growth. CapEx cycles determined by commercial factors, price, cost inflation, returns, and less by regulatory barriers. So just opening up land doesn't, it's not like an Oklahoma land rush and everybody just runs out there. There's other factors that go into it. Consolidation in the U.S. shale sector and change in corporate strategy. We just talked about that. I've been talking about that for over a year. U.S. supply response to Trump policies likely to be limited, especially in 2025. I agree. Now, I want to caveat this that the supply decrease could be related to price, right? Price deck has been coming down where I've got a six handle on WTI. And as I've said before, there's various camps here. One of the camps that I happen to be in is that we're getting close to the end of the abundance of shale. That doesn't mean it's going to run out. It means that it's not going to continue to be able to grow. And so the other camp is, well, oil prices are down, John. If oil goes to 85, 90, $100 a barrel, you'll see so many rigs go up. You'll see this thing bounce. It'll go V-shape and production will start growing again. I don't necessarily believe that. But we have, as of now, we don't know. We do know that if prices continue lower, what if we get prices down to 50? Nobody's going to be drilling out there. And because remember, don't forget the short cycle of shale wells, the Red Queen's race, if you will. If you want to even just forget about production growth, just to keep production stable and not falling, you have to run faster and faster. You have to drill more and drill more. But you're not going to go out and drill wells if the returns aren't there. And so, again, what's the cure for low prices? Low prices. Notwithstanding the fact that demand continues to grow, even when we're in an uncertain economic environment in various large economic zones around the world. This should be telling you something. I think we're going to have higher oil prices. This is one of the main risks to the Volcker Reagan gambit that Trump, if oil prices spike on them, if the economy turns around, or if the rest of some of the other economic areas around the world, say we get back up to 85, 90, something like that, that's not going to be helpful for the three arrow strategy. Because what will happen is your ability to cut rates will be slowed down or nullified because inflation will, your year over year inflation starts going back up. And so we're back to the people looking at the gas pump again when they're fueling up their F-250. So just wanted to point this out. This is why I'm bullish long-term conventional oil discovery since 1900. This was the glory days where all the major discoveries were made. You see over time, we've kind of, I don't like drawing the line from here. The person that put this chart up started up here, but you can even see here, we've talked about this before. Going forward, it's going to get harder and harder to make major discoveries because all the easy stuff's been found onshore. Now you're having to go offshore. That's more complicated, more expensive, takes longer. So this is from the recent Goring and Rosenzweig, fourth quarter commentary says year-on-year growth in U.S. shale production. So basically, there is very little growth in shale oil production as of now. You see, this is just since the beginning of 2023, which is, 2 years ago. This is, again, this could just be a manifestation of price. Again, if the oil price spikes and everybody goes back to work drilling wells, then you can have a rapid supply response, and that could, keep the oil price in check. We'll see. We'll see during the next price run who's correct, I think. So this is another thing that the Trump administration has to fix. This is the showing you the SPR releases, mostly by the Biden administration to help themselves stay in power, to lower inflation. Politically, there was no crisis. That's what the SPR is for. It's been slowly but surely filled. It takes a long time to refill, uh, but they say they want to refill it, but it could take, I think Chris Wright, the energy secretary, said it could take 5 to 7 years. So to get back up here is 300, basically 250 million barrels over 5 years you can divide. I think you're talking anywhere from like 100,000 barrels a day to 150,000 barrels a day, depending on how long they want to drag it out. So just wanted to point that out. I thought it was an interesting chart. So this is something I wanted to point out, something that I've been talking about in the Actionable Intelligence Alert newsletter as an opportunity, which very few people are availing themselves of because they don't believe it, at least the people in the West, because of the perception and the gaslighting. The Hang Seng Index, which is the Hong Kong market, has had its best start in 40 years. So it shows you all of the returns for the Hang Seng. The Hang Seng has been out of favor for a decade, but you see here it's had its best start in 40 years. We're in a bull market in China, I think multi-year. There's few analysts that feel the same, Louis, Vincent Goff, some other folks. It's a minority view right now, but um, it's a position that I've taken, and so far it's worked. This could be a flash in the pan. This could just be a short-term response, and then we'll go back to underperformance. I don't think that's the case, but we'll see because what I see happening in China around what some of the moves that are being made that the government's making, I think the perception's changing. Okay. And I think that, if you go back, was it 6 months ago or so, where they basically want to get the stock market up? They want more participation in the stock market. So they've made it easier. The average Chinese citizen doesn't have a lot of participation in these markets, mostly in the property markets. They pricked that bubble, but they have to give people an outlet. I mean, gold, that can't be the only thing. And people in China aren't allowed to take a lot of their money out of the country. And so I think that, you know, some of the moves they've made, allowing making it easier for people to invest, encouraging people to invest. That's one thing. But I also think these are just cheap stocks. These are cheap companies. And I think that a lot of people are sleeping on China, uh, especially people in the West that get their news. I mean, I was talking to somebody else about this the other day. The amount of gaslighting, propaganda does work. Gaslighting does work on the average person because the average person, look, you know, some people are more inquisitive, some people are more intelligent, some people are able to process information. Some people have a lot more biases than other people, so we're not really equal. And so a lot of people, like I said before, I've talked about this before, that's why I don't really try not to respond anymore to people on the internet because you got to remember who you're dealing with. You're dealing with people, there is a bell curve for intelligence. There is, not people are biased. They have emotional outbursts. 25 to 30% of the people in the US are on psychotropic drugs, prescription drugs for depression and everything else. I mean, these are not rational people. And so I try to stick to, this type of stuff as far as, but the biases exist here too with the gaslighting against China. China is a communist country that we must hate, that we must destroy because it wants to take the world over. Well, if that's your view, you're not going to invest in Chinese stock, even though they represent a value and they're doing the right things. I mean, a lot of the large companies in China, look at the run on look at the run that Alibaba's had. Okay. I think it's went from 80 to 130, 140. They continue to buy back billions of dollars worth of stock. I mean, this is what you want, right? But, people people will give you 100, they'll give you a reason why they don't want to do it, which is fine, But I'm just telling you what I think where the opportunities exist. And so far we're only 3 months into the year, but this is very positive for some stocks in the AI and the actionable intelligence alert newsletter portfolio. So this is positive. Basically, China has fired another bazooka. China is launching a spending bazooka. Second largest economy raised its general budget deficit to 4%, or $780 billion, the highest in 30 years. So that should tell you something. Liquidity. Markets move on liquidity and perception or sentiment. The government aims to increase spending to counter U.S. tariffs and target 5% GDP growth in 2025. Now, I'm not saying I agree with these Keynesian policies. I'm just telling you what they're doing, and that a lot more liquidity is going to be available for Chinese markets. That's what I'm saying. So it goes on here. China will also issue 1.3 trillion yuan in ultra long special sovereign bonds, 4.4 trillion new special local government bonds, 500 billion in special sovereign bonds. So the ankle biter will come back and say, yeah, but they'll just build more roads to nowhere and apartments. Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do. Okay. I'm just telling you what they're doing and that you can expect the liquidity to increase in the country. And higher liquidity is usually positive for risk assets. So this is the main thing that I think is I've been following. I'm not an expert by any means on semiconductors or semiconductor manufacturing processes or machines. But what I have observed over time is that when China decides to do something, they go all in. The government supports it. They do it with multiple companies. They have a lot of smart people. And so what we said is we're going to try to, the West and the US in particular is going to try to hold the Chinese back from advanced semiconductor technology. Okay, I get it. They're a competitor on the world stage, militarily, economically. It's not going to work because Chinese are just going to develop everything internally, and that's what they're planning on doing. China will produce the entire semiconductor supply chain in-house, like they've done with everything else. We're past the stage we were 50 years ago where, you know, China exported, Minkman schnozzes and plastic doggy duty, Frank. I mean, these people have a space program. They make the best cars in the world now. BYD was a joke 5 years ago. Now it's the best car maker in the world. I think the same thing when they put their mind to it, put the capital to it, they'll solve the problem. And then what is the US going to do? So I wanted to talk about oil again. We're back to oil. I think oil has been down now 8 weeks in a row. We haven't seen that for a lot of years. And we need to really watch this $66 level on WTI. If we get below it, well, uh, we could go down into the 50s. But again, low prices will solve low prices. I think it would just be temporary. With all of the stimulus that I just told you that they have a record stimulus in China right now. I'm just getting ready to talk about another big stimulus that Europe's getting ready to kick off. And the US uh, is implementing the Volcker Reagan gambit, get rates lower. And then I think they're going to try to push through huge tax cuts. So you could be in an environment where a lot of liquidity hits these markets. a lot of stimulus, if you will. So back to nuclear power. Nobody wants to talk about uranium. I know it's sad and amusing to watch the people on X, uranium Twitter, if you will, slowly one by one throw in the towel. People throwing in the towel, people selling at the bottom, people um, can't take the psychological abuse anymore. All the people with uranium, whatever in their name, in their handle, shutting their accounts down. This to me is an indication of a bottom in sentiment. There's some companies I like. I've been in buying them, nibbling. You could still buy the Sprott Trust at a discount. I don't think anything's changed fundamentally except that your mining stock had a big drawdown, that happens all the time in mining. So, uh, you have to be nimble with these things. They're not heirlooms. I've said that before. You just don't buy and hold them. I have got caught in the portfolio. I misjudged Global Atomic, or I'll go ahead and say I have Global Atomic in the portfolio. I misjudged it. But overall, we sold a lot of the uranium stocks that we had over a year ago, a lot of the speculative ones, and took down some pretty good profits. So I think overall, I've done fairly well in uranium when I look at my overall portfolio. Uh, I think it's a tremendous opportunity, but I think again, you're gonna have to be selective. Here's just more uh, fuel for the fire. This is on the supply front. This is next gen now saying that they're going to um, push out this mine in Canada, this Rook One project, till 2031. I think this thing was originally supposed to come online in 2028. So this is what we've seen consistently across the uranium supply universe, struggling to get brownfield projects back up and running. I mean, you've seen, what happened with Encore in the last week or two. They kind of stumbled and fumbled the ball. They basically missed their production. They fired the CEO. They've got board members now out in the field directing things. One thing I didn't realize is that they at that South Texas project they've got down here, they have like 80% declines in the well fields. So again, they have to get their well fields. It's a Red Queen's race to increase production or even maintain. You have to drill more wells. So they have said in the past that's been a struggle. And so now you've got people, they've, you've got actual board members, people that have 30, 40 years experience in ISR now in the field. So that's interesting, uh, in order to fix the problem. And we've seen this across, whether it's been Paladin has been struggling with uh, Langer Heinrich, Restart, whether it's all these companies, and goes without saying, Kaz Prom. So we still have these huge deficits. They're cumulative. Again, I think the price has to go substantially higher to draw in the capital, both money and human resources to fix this. That's why I think just buying physical uranium is probably the way to go for most people when it gets to a pretty significant discount. I think you'll do well. Uh, and then, if you're going to be messing around with mining companies, you have to understand that even in any one year, if you go back and look at charts of any mining companies, junior mining especially, um, you'll see drawdowns anywhere from 30 to 50 to 60% with companies that are nothing really changes news-wise. They just fluctuate a lot. Money comes in, money goes out. Money comes in, money goes out. It's all news-based. So the news has not been good for the junior mining component of the um, uranium mining. So therefore, the prices are down. I mean, whether I like it or not, whether I agree with it or not, whether it's been explained many times or not, the spot price drives retail investor sentiment. It's just that simple. So if the spot price starts going up, money will come back into the sector. No one cares about perm contracts or conversion and enrichment and the fuel cycle. They just don't know and don't care. Price going up, I buy. Price going down, I sell. That's how this works. Caveat emptor. So I just thought this was an interesting chart. Money supply adjusted gold price is 70% below 1980 peak. I mean, yeah, you could pull any chart out of your butt and do any of these comparisons. I can compare gold to oil and gold to the money supply and gold to what have you. But I just think that I'm very bullish on gold because where I see things going, especially in the West. Um, One of the main themes I have that I haven't talked about it recently, but demography being destiny, the West being old, entering now the maintenance stage into death, where a large portion of the people are getting older and want their pensions and want their benefits that these governments promise them, and they don't have the money. And so uh, I think that's a huge tailwind for gold because I think there's going to be a lot of monetary debasement in order to try to hold things together. Eventually, it will fail, but I think that's just a huge tailwind for gold. The whole decline of the U.S. hegemon around the world is positive for gold because it creates a lot of chaos and uncertainty, which I think benefits gold. And I think that just the behavior of the United States over the last, well, 25 years and culminating with some of the crazy things that the Biden administration did has really sent a message to folks that it doesn't pay to keep a lot of assets. If you're a country now, you have to diversify. And so gold has, because there's no other currency that has the US being the reserve currency, gold is a competing currency, as Ray Dalio has explained many times, and people forget. And so that's why I think that's another tailwind. So geopolitical, economic, demographic trends, I think are very positive for the gold price going forward. So let's talk about this. I'm amazed at the insanity of the Trump has really, as he's pulled back, as he's pulling back, as he's, you know, during his first administration, he kind of was going down this road, but he got his wings clipped with all the lawfare and impeachments, and he had to focus on other things. This time he's been very clear. You're going to pay your freight, Europe. One of the reasons I think that Europe's been able to enjoy, 35-hour work week, early retirements, lavish social spending is because they didn't have much of a defense burden. The U.S. was, as I've demonstrated in a previous video a couple weeks ago, the United States was paying the majority of the freight. It's just that simple. We were. Trump considers that a ripoff. So do I. Um, and so that's going to change. And so now, the hysteria that's going on in Europe, Western Europe, because, the whole purpose of NATO, as we've explained before, is to keep the U.S. in Europe, Russia out of Europe, and Germany down. This is starting to get shattered now. If the U.S. is pulling out, which they are pulling out of, I mean, seems to be slowly but surely, it's not going to be cold turkey, but so now the Europeans are moving to say, proposing an 800 billion euro increase in defense spending, which is money they don't have, quite frankly. And then you look at this demonic Ursula von der Leyen and some of the people around her. This is actually an opportunity. Never let a crisis go to waste, right? Because this helps them to do what they want to do, which is to centralize power in the EU, in Brussels, at the Commission. Ursula von der Leyen's Barbie and Ken Playhouse, otherwise known as the European Union, have more power, a European army, all that stuff that they've been talking about. The problem is they don't have the money. I thought it was interesting that when they made these announcements, if you looked at the bond yields across Europe, they spiked because the bond market said, hey, wait a minute, where are you going to get the money? You people don't have any money. You have moribund economies that are stagnant. Okay. You have a whole bunch of problems. You have a lot of debt. You have a lot of social spending. Where are you going to get this $800 billion or euros? You're going to borrow it? Boom, rates went up. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, showing the chart that European arms manufacturers have rallied quite substantially. This is what happens. This is the initial reaction. We'll see if it continues. I don't know. We'll see if they're able to um, uh, push this through. But I suspect that I heard one commentator say, a long time ago, it wasn't recent, but I forget who it was. You can in Europe, you can have a welfare state or you can have defense spending. You can't have both. They don't have the money. The benefits that they pay are so lavish. The expectations of the population are so high. If you start having to cut, which they're not going to be able to do politically, to increase defense spending, there's going to be political change. People are not going to go for it. The other thing I found amusing, it's not amusing, it's sad actually, was there was a poll done of, young people who, I think overall people, I don't remember. I think I did show it, of the amount of percentage of people that would fight for their country. And it was very low in Europe, very low. It was higher in Eastern Europe. It was high in Ukraine. I don't know who did the poll, how they structured it, but we've seen that this is the argument I've made. There's no appetite among the people for this stuff. This is all a construct of the globalist, the EU Commission, and the cronies in Brussels, and feed trough and centralizing power as much as they can there. This is an opportunity for them to say, well, we need to create now because we've been abandoned by the Americans. They're no longer our friends. I mean, they actually had one of these politicians come out this week and say that not only is Europe at war with Russia, they're at war with the United States now. Terrific. This is what you get, okay, when you feminize your society. This is, crazy comments. If you're a married man, you understand that that happens occasionally in your household. Best to let it go in one ear and out the other. Sometimes that particular species is not rational, but probably better not to be saying things like that out loud. Anyway, back to this. Uh, they don't have the money. So we'll see how they do it. Again, Europe's in terminal decline. I think, again, the European Union, NATO, these things are not going to exist. I can't tell you the exact date, but you can see the fracturing. No one is interested because there's no political will among the population to raise a 2 million man army and then go fight the Russians. This is ridiculous. Now, there's people that are going to be in the comments that have bought this gaslighting and think this is going to happen. They have a foreign legion there. Go there and fight now. No one's stopping you, but they won't. I saw this ridiculous interview. They showed just one anecdote. This woman in the UK was holding up a sign. We have to support Ukraine. We have to do this. They were interviewing her. Yes, the UK needs to get their army larger and blah, 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 spend more money on weapons, blah, blah, blah. And then the guy was like, this girl was just like a young girl, naive. She looked like she was about 160, 170 on the hoof, about, 170 pounds of boiled chicken, out of shape, glasses, kind of homely looking. And then they asked her, would you be willing to serve in the UK Army? Oh no, I'm a conscientious objector. I mean, this is what you're dealing with, folks. Not, these are not serious people, okay? And they are really, there's going to be a period of several decades where I think they're going to have to get serious because they have imported, you've heard me say this before, and people are starting to roll their eyes now, certain people out there. They've imported a population that is pretty serious about what they want to do. And they are going to continue on their plan. And if you don't get serious, well, you're going to have the problem is not Russia. The problem is not Iran. The problem is your own governments and the incompatible Muslim population that's growing in your countries. That's your real long-term problem. But that's fodder for another discussion. Having said that, I will now take a couple zips of coffee and let all of the sissies and weak-minded people, this would be your time to go away because we're going to get into geopolitical. Okay. So it was funny. I didn't show the side-by-side videos, but if you remember, Ursula von der Leyen, who was the failed German defense minister, it was her previous job before she was the president of the European Commission. She was not elected to this position. She was appointed. I don't know exactly how all this works, the commission. I don't know. Anyways, she's the big poobah because she will do whatever, she believes fervently, zealot for the European project. And so she's the right person for it. I give her credit for that. She's all in. She will do and say anything to advance a united states of Europe. That's what she's all about. So if you recall, in 2022, she remember she mocked Russia. She was up there in her yellow and blue blazer and shirt, because she's supporting Ukraine. And she was claiming that Russia was so desperate because the sanctions were biting so hard. The sanctions that the EU put on Russia were so tough that they didn't have any more microchips there. And they were reduced to disassembling washers and dryers and dishwashers to get the microchips out for their missiles. Remember that? Because the sanctions were decimating Russian industry. Okay. Remember? Now they had another video, recent video, where she says that she insists Europe must burn through $800 billion to defeat this supposedly ruined Russia. This is what I've been pointing out. Which is it, folks? It can't be both. Russia can't be, again, we have the same shills coming out, the same people, the grifters, the people that are in the think tanks, the NGOs, all the people that benefit from war. All these war pigs are now out saying, we have to do all this. We have to raise this army. All these little Baltic villagers, little mayors from these Baltic villages coming out like Kala Kahas. Okay. Why is this woman, what is it? Comes from a country that has no standing. They're irrelevant in this. Okay. It doesn't matter what she says, but she's all in. She's went all in. And so that's who you want. If you're want the EU project, you have these crazy women, saying these things that are not, and people are going to get mad. Well, you just don't like women, not crazy women that don't know what they're talking about. So which is it, Ursula? You can't hide anymore. When they only had three networks, you could say something 3 years ago and it would never get brought back up. People are all over the internet making memes about everything. You can't hide from your previous statements. And yet the gaslighting continues. People will look at that and it won't register in their mind because they have this bias or cognitive dissonance. So which is it? Is Russia getting ready to collapse? Why haven't they collapsed already? Uh, Did they run out of washing machines yet? What's going on? But yeah, we have to spend $800 billion, or the European Union does, that it doesn't have, and raise this huge army that nobody wants to be in to supposedly deal with this Russian threat. Okay, well, we'll see if it actually happens. What it is another way to grab money and power. These are people that have never created any wealth in their life. They've never done anything of any significance. They're just there because they will say yes to whatever ridiculous thing that the globalist masters want them to say yes to. And it's all about centralizing power, centralizing control of the money, centralizing everything. That's what this is about. Taking away more power and influence and money. You know, who I thought it was funny watching this gathering of these dwarves when they had their little thing there in I think it was London, and they had all the I think I showed it last week. They were around this table, and the cracks are developing. I mean, I think Giorgia Meloni came out and said there will not be any Italian participation in any peacekeeping troop deployments to Ukraine. So it's spreading. You already have, people in Poland saying the same thing because you're just going to get, incoming Iskander strikes by the Russians if you if you do that. People understand if the body bags start coming back from the Donbass with Polish flags and UK flags and French flags, the political establishment will people will turn against it. They have no appetite for this. It's one thing to virtue signal like that frumpy girl in the UK. Yeah, we have to do this. We have to do that. Who's we? Are you willing to join the UK military? No, I'm a conscientious objector. You see, which is it, Ursula? So I go back to this Romania situation. So I guess, I don't know the full story. I'm sure we have some people that are in the comments that are from Romania that can help wear us away. I don't really want to comment too much, but JD Vance mentioned this when he was giving his speech at the Munich uh, Defense Coalition or whatever meeting that they recently had, where he was talking about, there's this guy that Georgescu that is running for president, and they don't the he doesn't the EU doesn't want him to be even in the election. They don't want to give any opportunity for the people to vote for this guy. I don't know where he's polling at. I don't know if he has a realistic chance of forming a government there, if he can even win. I don't know. They don't even want to give the chance because they saw what happened in Brexit. They've seen Trump. Best way going forward is to not even let these people onto the ballot. Keep them out of the system so it's impossible for the people. We have the set candidates. You're going to vote for Keir Starmer or Richie Sunak, who are exactly the same guy. Okay, same policies regardless. And so, I've heard some of the policies of this guy. I like him right off the bat because I've heard that he is orthodox. I like that. I like the fact that he's against building, from what I understand, building this large NATO base in Romania. Okay. And that he, is kind of in the same mold of some of the other politicians like Fico and Orban, not necessarily as nationalistic, but more pro-Romanian, a Romanian leader that wants to put Romanian interests first, not the Ursula von der Leyen and the EU Commission uh, desires first. And that cannot be allowed in Ursula von der Leyen's Ken and Barbie Playhouse. And so, evidently, I don't know if this is true. I'm just reporting. We need more information. Starting next week, the Romanian government will impose fines of 10,000 to 20,000 euros and censor online content that they consider to be, quote, conspiracy theories or, quote, manipulative, etc. They will basically be able to censor everything they don't like. We have to remember in Vietnam, I've said this before, they had this saying, we have to destroy the village to save the village. I mean, I guess that's what we have to do nowadays. We have to destroy this democracy to save democracy. Um, I mean, most people, I think there's a lot of people in the EU, there's a lot of people in the West that see what's going on, that are disillusioned, that have apathy, that have anger, or, you know, uh, I don't consider Xi and Putin my main enemies in the world. I consider people in my own government, okay, that are putting their interests ahead of my interests as more of my enemy. People that are deliberately going out of their way to make my life more difficult and calling themselves leaders of my country. Those are the people I consider enemies, okay? And I think a lot of people are feeling the same way. And so they're going to have to use increasingly larger and larger amounts of crackdowns on free speech, on the internet, on suppressing these candidates with these legal things. I think they threw the guy in jail in Romania after the first. I mean, they have like it's another one of those countries that has like a couple of you have the first wave first part of the election, and then people advance to the second round or whatever. And then they put the guy in jail or whatever, doing whatever they have to do, get some judge, some corrupt judge somewhere to make a ruling that's contrary to what the people want because the judge, they have to. They'll do whatever they have to do to hold on to power because there's so much power and money at stake. This is what it always comes down to, always. All right, that's it for this week. I appreciate the a lot of things going on. Again, I believe that there's that Trump, uh, Reagan Volcker gambit that the Trump administration is running, not necessarily raising rates, but cutting off that fiscal support, all that money that was going out. Try to take the pain early in the beginning months of the administration, and hopefully that put a bunch of incentives in place, lower oil prices, lower rates, cut taxes, and rev this economy up like Reagan did, and have that have that possibly, if this works. I made a statement the other day on another interview that somebody interviewed me. If it works, if they pull it off, it could be, that could put MAGA in a position to be in power for a decade or more. And that would be really something amusing. Then you can really start dealing with the deep state because you can't do it in one administration. But we'll see what happens. Again, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for visiting. Thank you for spending this time with me. I appreciate the subscribers. I even appreciate all the criticism. It doesn't bother me. Say what you got to say. I don't really ban people unless they get super like nasty. I think I've banned two or three people in the history of this channel. Say what you got to say. And again, appreciate all. Hey, it's good for the algorithm. So thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you next week.